Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 4. The main focus for today will be the completion of the mainline ring around the map. And since we only need to connect a couple more cities to it, this task will not take the entire length of the episode to complete. We will of course finish mowing the lawn in between the tracks using the same method we employed before, and then, I will start decorating a little bit, by placing some fences around the main line. Unfortunately, I will encounter a crash during this, and it will end up messing up my workflow so much, that I will end up not only abandoning the endeavor, but also delete the fences I will have placed until then, since I won't like the way they follow the tracks. You'll see what I mean when we get there. Instead, we will close the episode by smoothing down the terrain around the main line, since the uneven nature of it will be one of the reasons why the fences will end up being so terrible. Before we do anything else, let's fix those little errors I found in the tracks. Altogether, I found 2 of them. They are hard to see, but they cause a big slowdown on the trains as they go over them. So, instead of waiting for a train to come around, I'll just try to find them by eye. There. You see? A very small kink in the way the tracks are aligned. Since the vehicles are very picky about the turn radii in the game, we need to fix this, or they will keep dropping their speed down to 50 km per hour every time they reach this point. And that should do it. But we still have one on the ring, so let's go and hunt it down. This second one is not as bad as the first one was. That one was dropping the train speeds to 50, but the second one only makes them go down to around 100, but that's bad enough to warrant a bit of effort to fix. Also, I did notice in some places that the catenaries are spaced out in irregular intervals. This fix is more for aesthetic reasons, rather than for efficiency. Ah, so much better now. Let's just make sure there are no more left, and we can carry on. Okay, we can get to work on finishing the mainline ring around the map. Next stop, Kilburn. Wait, that's where the station will go. Good thing the game allows you to replace stations that got deleted recently. We had a bus stop here, and if we do it quickly, we don't need to mess around with the local bus line when we put it back. By the way, thanks for letting me know that if I hold shift while placing the textures, it will override the ones placed by buildings. Once we get to the decorating part of the show, I'm sure it will be very useful. At this point, I wasn't really concerned with making the stations nice, I just wanted to place the placeholder versions. The real ones will come later. Okay, we have roads in the way that are currently being used by our trucks. We will need to build at least one overpass to put things back in order. Preferably it would be 2, but one will do the trick for the time being. Alright, time to put that road back, preferably without using a level crossing. That will do quite nicely. There are a lot of these old brick bridges around the real-life locations, so it only makes sense to use them for shorter crossings. Let's place the station crossing at Greenwich, and then connect the two ends together. And thanks again for suggesting a workaround for the snapping issues. If it happens, we can just try to connect things from the other end, and that sometimes fixes the problem. Whenever this snapping bug happens, we better make sure that the catenaries are placed correctly. These kinds of sharp turns on the rails does lower the overall speeds we can expect from our trains, but to be honest, I'm not all that bothered. It's still above 200 km per hour, which is right around the maximum that I want to aim for. Plus that kind of speed will only ever be achievable by our express services between towns. The freight trains will never get anywhere close to those speeds. Alright, time to add the next city to the mainline passenger line. Make sure it uses the correct platforms, and we can move on. And the last city we need to add is Tottenham. After that, we only need to connect the two remaining ends together, and the ring will be complete. Yeah, this road is definitely in the way. Although it does give us a warning for getting rid of it, so we will need to put it back when we're done. The Tottenham station is at a bit of an awkward angle. Good thing there is more than enough distance between the towns to allow for a nice and gentle turn. 230 kilometers per hour will be plenty enough for our purposes. I don't intend to turn this thing into HS2, this is not a bullet train kind of a playthrough. Just to make sure we can go past the goods factory, let's place a midway rail section we can aim for. Yep, the speeds are still in the acceptable range. Very nice, and done quite quickly. We can safely add Tottenham to the service. Only one thing remains. We need to bridge the last remaining section, and complete the circle. As usual, there are a lot of roads in the way. Good thing they are mostly going to industries, so they won't complain if we break those connections. Time to place the bridge. This is a major river crossing, so those stone brick models will not do the trick. Let's just stick with the green ones. We already have one on this river, so might as well keep it consistent. So far so good. This portion, however, this one has a big hill in the way. We won't get away with doing it in one go. Sure, we can do the first lane like that, but since we have a tunnel, we need to do things a bit more slowly from now on. See? Tunnels will always do this kind of messy thing when trying to place long tracks all at once. Breaking things up into smaller segments does the trick, but it also makes the build process longer. I didn't really like how the tunnel was barely having any dirt above it for quite a long while. I think it makes more sense to start it when it gets closer to the parts where it will go under a lot more earth. And it is done. The mainline ring is complete. The first major milestone in the series. The thing is, now that the main line is a circle, we don't need to have the trains going back and forth. We can just have two separate lines, one going clockwise, the other counterclockwise. And that should do it for the clockwise line. Before we start setting up the other one, we should make sure it uses the correct platforms in the stations. Like here. There was no reason to switch lanes in Wembley. Or in Camden. And that is about it. The trains no longer need to turn around, they can just keep going in one direction, and they will just loop back to where they started. Now we just need to do the exact same thing again, but in the other direction. Since the clockwise line was using the first platform everywhere, we can just tell this one to use platform number 2 in all the stations, and that should be enough to ensure the trains will not cross paths. Completing the ring was a bit pricey, so we kept using all the money we were making during the process. If we want to add trains to the opposite direction, we need a loan. I guess the easiest way to do this would be to just clone one of the existing trains, and then reassign it to the new line. Wait, isn't this the counterclockwise train? I must have put one of the old ones on the new line. No matter, the end result is the same either way. And now that the ring is finished, I wanted to get rid of the grass from in between the tracks along the new additions. And it was a good enough excuse to also test the tracks themselves. If we keep following one of the trains, we can see if there are any points where we experience any noticeable slowdowns. This will take a while, so let's talk about the future of the series a little bit. Now that the mainline ring is finished, we can do multiple things with it. Either start decorating it, or keep expanding the functionality. Personally, I lean towards the latter. If we start adding aesthetic changes to the thing, we might end up deleting some of them as we go back to doing some expansions. What would make sense is to use the texture paint brushes, and start laying down some rough outline for the freight side of things. Not to mention that we still have some towns on the outskirts. Those are not connected to the ring yet, so we could add some ways for them to be connected to the rest of London. I don't think it makes sense for these particular lines to have a direct access to the main line. We can just add terminal platforms to the existing stations, and have smaller, local passenger lines moving people to the stations where they can hop onto a mainline service if they wish. It was also suggested that we could add some heritage lines into the mix, using steam locomotives, and one or two of these lines would be perfect for this. Then there are the freight stations. Here we have two choices. Either build them inside the cities, or far away from the center. I think it mostly depends on the way the towns are laid out. If we can build the freight stations inside the industrial neighborhoods, I think it would make sense to have them there, as long as the trains don't go over the residential areas. But still, I might still prefer to have them be well away from the city, and just use trucks to move the goods to the destinations. By the way, in case you are not familiar with this kind of a mainline setup, this is how it will work. Remember what I told you about the way the game determines if an industry have a destination for its goods? If there is any kind of a transport service between the two endpoints, and those services have the necessary cargo types that can accommodate those goods, then the industry will start putting out things for pickup in the relevant stations. We will use the main line as the artery for a map-wide distribution system. All the mainline cities will have their own freight stations, and all the surrounding industries will pool their stuff there. And then we will have big beefy freight trains moving all sorts of stuff up and down the main line, picking up and dropping off things at town stations as needed, and then the local freight services will take those goods to their destinations. And since the game recognizes the existence of these lines automatically, and routes the different goods all by itself, we only need to give it the routes to use. The factories will choose where they want to deliver their stuff. It is way less involved than the super in-depth systems in other games, it's just a matter of a different approach. If you want, you can still min-max the hell out of your different delivery routes, but there is a kind of satisfaction in only providing the routes for others to use. Here, you are just another company, providing transportation services to other companies. Take the lumber line we've been using for money until now. We are basically forcing the forests to only sell to that particular sawmill, and we are forcing that sawmill to only be able to sell to that particular tools factory, and we are forcing that tools factory to only be able to sell to Kensington. But if everything was connected to everything via the main line, then all those industries will decide for themselves where they want to buy their materials from, and where to sell their products to. Will it be extremely efficient? No. Far from it. There will be lines all over the place that make next to zero profits, and instead they will keep running a massive deficit. On the other hand, there will be lines that will keep generating such a massive amount of profits, that it will more than make up for any kind of shortfall generated by the lines that will see little to no use. Anyways, I managed to ramble on while we took care of the grass sticking through the tracks. Let's quickly get rid of that warning on top by reconnecting Tottenham to Kilburn, and let's carry on. Okay, time to change this bridge. I really don't like it. This arched version will make more sense, I think. Next, we still need to add a local bus service to Tottenham. Shouldn't take long, it's a very small city. Nice, we have a depot in Kilburn, let's just use that. I don't think we have an Arriva bus anywhere yet, let's use one of those. Okay, let's see, which number did I want to give to the Tottenham buses? After consulting my to-do list, it was 55. Just a random line number that happened to go through Tottenham. Wow, we have a lot of people waiting on the main line. I might need to add even more trains onto the ring in the near future. And this is where I will start placing fences around the tracks. But if you remember my intro, I will run into a crash while doing it, and that will end up forcing me to abandon this. By the way, the vanilla game doesn't have this very convenient way of placing these fences. Without this mod, we would need to place every piece one by one, and that would pretty much make it impossible to do the entire length of the main line by hand. Modders of the world, I salute you. And you might be seeing something that I failed to consider until now. I am placing the fences on the embankments. To be perfectly honest, it is kind of good that the crash happened. I would much rather have the fences on more even ground, so it's good that I ended up doing that, instead of placing the fences now. And this is where the crash happened. Good thing the game saves in moments like this, so I didn't lose any progress. I still kept going until the next station, but I did make the mistake of placing the first segment of fencing in a straight line, which ended up completely messing up the placement. You'll see in a second. See how it kind of goes back and forth? I would much rather have it go in lines that follow the tracks perfectly. This kind of imperfection made me abandon the attempt for now, and instead looked for another thing to do before the episode was over. And seeing all the embankments along the tracks, I knew what had to be done. Time to bust out the smoothing tool. I'm really glad the game doesn't destroy trees when we are terraforming. And anyone who's familiar with the game will not be surprised that I'm out of money. Changing the terrain is expensive in this game, and we have a lot of ground to cover still. I will end up maxing out our loan again by the end. Oh well, the cost of doing business, I guess. Our saving grace is that the map is relatively flat. If it was more hilly, it would have been even more expensive. Once the fences are put in, and we place some more trees and other decorations, I think this will look rather nice. Fine, let's max out that loan already. And that is it for smoothing. At least for now. Once we are doing the proper decorating, I'm sure we will end up doing more. And I think that will do it for today. With the mainline ring finished, we can start setting up those freight stations. I think it would make more sense to take that kind of slowly at first. We just need to set up the different town freight hubs, and then slowly start introducing the different industries. Also, once we have freight trains running on the main line, we will definitely need to reroute the passenger trains. I think it would make more sense to have those running in the middle lanes on the main line, and use the outer ones for freight. Those are the ones that will keep branching off the main line toward the freight stations, so having them on the outside will make it easier to create the necessary grade-separated junctions. If the freight was in the middle, then they would keep crossing paths with the passenger lines, which is suboptimal to say the least. If we do this right, then freight trains will never really enter the passenger stations, and if that turns out to be the case, we can safely slim those down to only having 2 lanes on the central platforms, and use the remaining space for local services, like I talked about earlier. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.